Welcome to Crossfire. I'm your host, Anthony Juliano, CTO for Landmark Ventures. I'm joined here by Krishna Bhagavathula, as well as Larry Quinlan, Sigal, Zarmi, and Chad McDonald. If each of you could just maybe very quickly introduce yourself, and I'll just set some ground rules on what we're going to do today. We've got a couple of questions. We're going to take sides of issues. No hitting below the belt. Let's keep things very, very cordial, folks. But also, I will say, let's try and keep things crisp and really kind of take a side. I think it's always more interesting and controversial. I'll pass to you, Krishna, if you want to introduce yourself.
Sure. I'm Krishna Bhagavathula. I'm the Chief Technology Officer at the NBA. Been in this role for about 4 years now and thoroughly enjoying it.
Excellent. Larry.
Larry Quinlan. I just wrapped up more than a decade as the Global Chief Information Officer for Deloitte and moving towards retirement and thinking about the next chapter.
I have a feeling you'll be back and doing something, my guess is. Sigal?
Well, I'm also just wrapped up my operational role and moved to a strategic advisor role with Morgan Stanley. And I'm looking forward to doing some board work and staying involved with NFTs.
Awesome. Chad?
I'm Chad McDonald. I'm CIO for Radiant Logic, and I long to be in Larry's shoes moving towards retirement.
I think we all do. Well, you are all certainly titans of the industry. Thank you very much for joining us today. First question I had. So when I look at, right now, obviously, I think there's no debate about the pandemic being good or bad. It has its both qualities, and obviously it itself is a terrible tragedy that's caused lots of loss. But when I look at pandemic speed, it's actually really introduced a whole lot of things. While the rest of the world seems to have stood still with things like restaurants closing down, people staying indoors, not traveling, all of a sudden business had to move at a very, very fast pace. It expedited digital transformation, it created big journeys, put us on a brand new path that was faster than ever imagined. Just curious, from your perspective and your various different roles, do you see the pandemic speed as good or bad? Larry, I'll start with you.
Good, really, really good. There's so much stuff that it just washed away. The ability for people to just block things because you haven't analyzed it enough, or get the perfect business case, or you haven't had every single element of the privacy or legal risk analyzed for the last 2 years. The ability to just move faster because there's a platform with urgency. I think this has been amazing for taking a second look at business problems.
I don't want to put any words in your mouth about the speed of Deloitte, but at the end of the day, I think all enterprises, especially large ones, really have a challenge. So it sounds like things that you were trying to get done, you could finally actually do. That's kind of the gist.
Yep, absolutely.
Krishna, what about for you?
So I think it's largely good. One of my favorite things about the pandemic is there is a framework called the 3-box solution, or the 3-box framework for innovation, which was developed by a professor at Dartmouth, I think Professor Govit Ranjan. So it's really very simple. The 3 boxes are manage the present, selectively forget the past, create the future. So I almost feel that we may have been not as selective in forgetting the past, and maybe we've forgotten a little too much. And to me, that's the only thing about the pandemic and the pace of moving forward that bothers me a little bit, is maybe we have pivoted a little too much on being remote, on making sure that the boundaries between work and life are blurred a little too much. So that's my only concern. I do think that from a technology progress standpoint, we made tremendous amount of, like Satya said, right? I think the amount of progress that companies have made, especially in the traditional IT space, in 2 years or in 2 months, I think the kind of progress that was made was more than what had happened in the last 2 years, right? So that's the only thing that I sometimes debate on, but largely I agree with what Larry said. I mean, I think it has been good, and I'm very optimistic.
Chad, what about for you? I mean, I think there's a lot of risk inherent to all of this speed of work. And if you look at the old adage, right, it's always you can do it cheap, good, or fast. I think we definitely went fast. So, Chad, for you, is there a good or bad side to this?
Well, I feel like from a security perspective, I'm the dog that caught the car, right? I've been asking for a lot of the security controls that really ease digital transformation for decades at this point in my career. COVID removed all the barriers to moving forward. So we went fast. I won't say we went cheap, but we went fast, and there we go. But I think it has certainly evolved business. And I think I'm interested to see sort of what these barriers allow business to do in the next few years, sort of ideally post-COVID.
Sigal, pandemic speed, good or bad? And I think there's other aspects we're not even talking about yet, which, fatigue, let alone how can you make people run this fast for this long? So what about on your side?
I was just going to mention that. I think from a technology standpoint, it's great. It's fast. Look at the vaccine. How long did it take to come up with a vaccine? Unbelievable. New technologies that have been talked about for a while in pharma were not really materialized unless you have a crisis. And we had a crisis, and all of a sudden you see that. But the mental health issues, the disconnection, everybody's called this area, I think it's the great resignation, high turnover of employees. I'm sure everybody's dealing with that. And how do you make sure your teams stay connected? I think that's the bad side of going that fast.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of
that. There is always two sides to everything. So from a technology standpoint, good, like Larry said. But from the human standpoint, I'm not so sure.
Fair enough, and I think that human component is something we need to look at. So time will tell exactly what was good, what was bad, but I agree with everything here. Let's move on. Next topic. So obviously this transition to work from home has put us in a place where we have remote end users. If you look before the pandemic, a lot of organizations did not want to trust their end users working from home. They would issue a laptop, they would lock down controls, everything has to be through a corporate VPN. I think when you had to make a plan and actually execute on a business continuity plan, pretty much overnight, a lot of those controls probably went by the wayside. So trusting remote end users, can we do it? Sigal, I'll start with you.
Yeah, I was, I guess, lucky enough to work in companies that had that trust for a long time. And Morgan Stanley had a remote user solution a while ago. That's why we were able to switch, 80,000 employees to remote connectivity almost within a week or even less than that. So we were very lucky because the solution was there. Yes, we had to beef it up because we never had 80,000 people logging in remotely. And yes, it does provide or present a bigger security issue because now you have a lot more people, and we all know how the hackers and the security landscape has evolved over the last 18 months. So we need to trust our employees. That goes without saying, but that doesn't reduce the risk of something happened.
Fair enough. Chad, obviously you've got a security background on this, so curious to get your take.
I'm going to walk the middle of the line here and say it depends. My opinion,
no wishy-washy the organization on Crossfire, man. Got to go. Pick a side.
Yes and no. Organizations that were a little more on the mature side as far as security goes, I think are very well positioned to trust end users. Organizations that hadn't really made a significant investment in information security or endpoint controls, I think are going to feel some pain over the next couple of years. Can we trust real users? Are the tools out there? Are users knowledgeable enough? Yes, I think all the pieces are there to make this work. It's whether or not the organizations have spent time and effort to sort of assemble the pieces into a cohesive sort of story around endpoint security.
Larry, everybody talks about zero trust. So if zero trust is not a thing that everybody's kind of pushing towards, then why is this even a thing, right? What's kind of the background on it? So can we trust our end users?
You can trust your end users to execute the mission of the organization. You can trust end users to go do the things that make sense in terms of sales and profits and mission and values, and no issues there. Let's be clear, you cannot trust them to follow the rules. You cannot trust them to execute the appropriate controls. You cannot trust them with cybersecurity. So it's an interesting mix. There are people essential to executing the mission. They're the right people, they're amazing people, and they can get it done. So we have to trust them there. At the same time, we've got to put in better technology that senses rule violations, that enforces certain capabilities, as opposed to simply leaving it on the backs of employees to absolutely execute every control that there needs to be.
So you can trust them to a certain extent, or maybe it's a concept of trust but verify. Krishna, what about for you? Can we trust our remote users?
Yeah, look, in my perspective, right, at the NBA, we are as much of an events company as we are a sports and a media and a technology company. And all of our events are done at various locations, right, whether it's the finals or the All-Star game or what have you. So for years, we've relied on a remote workforce. We've relied on people that are out there on the field and the arenas actually getting work done. So our systems have been built to support remote employees and remote workforces, and even have a large presence in China, like I'm sure many of you have, and we have learned to work within the Great Firewall in China as well. So it's something that we have inherently supported. So I always like to say this, right? I mean, and it's very similar to trust but verify. Trust your users, but that doesn't mean that you should not implement zero trust networks. I do think zero trust networks and zero trust architectures are inherently important because they are actually about securing your systems and protecting your infrastructure. And that doesn't mean that you don't trust your users. You want to make sure that it's hard for the bad guys to get into your infrastructure. And we all know the impact of ransomware and the impact it has on business, and that sometimes innocent end users are victims of those attacks, and they could actually proliferate into your networks. So that's why zero trust security is so important.
Now, I'm going to take the opposite side on this, and I think the reason for it is when I look at the concept, yes, we have to trust our employees, but I don't think we can trust our end users. And I'll say that from a different perspective. To your point, Larry, obviously we trust our employees to do the mission, the job that they were hired to do. But when I look at really what's happened in the past 18 months, there's a whole lot of room for abuse. And it's certainly the attackers from a security posture perspective. But also, if you think about a lot of the things that you're reading in the news, developer working 5 different jobs, just spending 10 hours a week on each. Now, if they're able to do that, maybe there's something that should be said about the role that they're in, right? Or maybe they're just, really super capable, and maybe they deserve to have the pay of 5 different jobs, right? But when I look at, a lot of the things that are going on right now, it's really hard to actually control or to put visibility and understanding around what end users are doing. So I think eventually we'll be able to trust our end users. But the other side of this too, Krishna, and you brought it up, Sigal, if you think about the Great Resignation, right, which is right around the corner or we're in the middle of it, insider threat is a huge, huge issue. So I don't see how we can really trust our end users. We can trust the individuals that are employees, but I just don't see that we can trust the end users. Any reactions? Good, then we'll move on. Sorry, go ahead, Larry.
No, I was going to say, I agree with the concept. Maybe I would position it differently. I don't know if it's truly about trusting our people or not. They're just a set of corporate processes that need to occur, right? There's certain legal things, there are compliance things, there are things you get sued over, and simply relying on people to do it doesn't make sense. There are a sophisticated array of attacks coming at them. They're busy people. Just saying, I trust you, you have to do this. It just doesn't make sense. So I don't know it's really about whether we trust them or not. I just don't think that they're in the best position to execute all of those things, and we have got to put in better technology to help.
I think we as corporations have not put in place the right technology process controls to adapt to the pandemic. Going back to that pandemic speed, the reality is I think there's just a lot of catching up we have to do. So I'll agree with you. I think we can trust them. Maybe that's the wrong word, but we don't have the right processes in place. Sigal, final comment?
No, I agree. I agree.
Okay. Moving on to the next topic, blockchain, crypto, NFT. Some people are calling it tulips and that this is all just the crazy bubble. Other people are saying this is here to stay. I think the fact that there was something like, $3 billion in revenue or $3 billion in volume done on OpenSea last month is a pretty good indicator there's something here. So now the big question is, what should the role of the CIO be in context of NFTs, of crypto, of blockchain? Is it about being kind of the cautious, spectator? Is it about being the protector of the organization to stop the distraction? Is it about being the innovator and the one who leads and drives these projects? I'll go ahead and start with you, Chad.
I think honestly, for me, and in my experience, it's educator. Educating the organization about how these technologies can enable the business. Beyond that, providing enough information for there to be, informed business decisions about how to use the tools. Dovetail that into some governance beyond that, and I think you're good to go. But it's still evolving at a point right now that I don't think there's a clear path, my experience, to define what the CIO's role specifically is beyond that.
Sure. Krishna, how instrumental or how kind of tethered to crypto, NFT, and all that world should the CIO, CTO be?
I think very aligned with the business, right? I mean, speaking again, in my role at the NBA, I'm sure many of you NFT fans out there know about NBA Top Shot. Now, this product we launched in November of last year, largely in stealth mode. And the public numbers that are available out there say that we did 800 million in business through June of this year. So in about 6 months or 7 months. So that's nothing to laugh about, right? That's a sizable chunk of revenue. And that's really interesting from a business standpoint. And I think I look at the role of technologists at the NBA to, just like Chad said, it's to educate, it's to help separate fact from fiction, and to explain to them what the hype cycle is all about. And let them make the decision on whether they want to ride on that hype cycle, and make sure that if the decision is to ride the hype cycle, that we have the adequate protections in place. Because again, like I say, the NFT followers and the crypto and blockchain followers here know that once you play in that space, it comes with a bunch of issues that you need to be aware of. Stuff like money laundering, for instance. So what kind of controls do we suddenly get into that space that banks operate in, and we need to be aware of those kind of issues while they're not really bound by the regulatory and governance around money laundering and so on and so forth. So, I mean, just overall awareness, making sure that we are working with the business owners, making sure that they understand the need for speed, that, that we're striking the right partnerships, because if we strike the wrong partnership, again, it's an impact to the brand. And that's from a standpoint as well. So I think it's playing that kind of an advisor, leading at times and supporting at times.
So and within that, I guess, Krishna, maybe just kind of a quick question: how involved were you? Like, how did Top Shots come about? Was it like business came to you and said, "Hey, we want to do this thing with NFTs and we don't know what to do. Go figure it out," or was it more like "Hey, what's something that can be done?" and you brought ideas to the table, or what was that kind of relationship? How did that work with your role, which is kind of a live example of where the NFT and kind of role of the CTO is?
Yeah, so great question. I mean, we've been following the the blockchain space from 2018, back when CryptoKitties launched and became like an overnight sensation, if you remember that. And we were interested in that. We were thinking about how the NBA could leverage that, and we were looking at that. So it's not entirely a technology push. It was largely business driven. And the whole idea of digital collectibles appealed to us. And, there was a team that was thinking about ways to position the brand and exploit blockchain as a technology platform to support that. But the technology team was entirely looped in, and it was a true partnership.
It's always funny to me that, yeah, please, Sigal, go.
Yeah. No, I think it's more than an educator and a supporter. I think we all talk about the role of the CIO. Every CIO wants to be more than cost cutting, risk management, and just the people who are putting in all the controls in place and following the process. Every CIO wants to be the innovator, coming up with new business models, and this is the opportunity to do that. Think about what new product your business can build on top of blockchain, NFT, crypto. And in some businesses, it might be easier than in others. So maybe the NBA is much more of an easier ideas around what you can do with NFT. In, maybe Larry can talk about in a big four, blockchain can be playing a big role in changing business models, right? Because the audit firms, maybe that can be a big impact there. So it depends on your business. I think it's the point that I'm trying to make is that as a CIO, you have to be the one that come into the table with new ideas for products, because you want to sit at the table as a business leader and not just as the person that is the protector of the environment or the cost cutter.
Larry, did you bring any big NFT ideas to the table at Deloitte?
I've spent some time thinking about this one, and it just seems like this wave is a very uneven one. In some places, people are going to be surfing really high, and in others, the wave's not even going to reach the shore. And this is one where I do believe, I agree with Sigal entirely, we've got to be a little bit out ahead. But my sense is we've got to be a little bit out of it ahead, trying to figure out business opportunities. And right now, for the next couple of years, there are a number of places where there just isn't a lot of revenue potential for an organization. And that CIO probably needs to really focus more on education, tinkering, thinking about it, learning, etc. There are other places where the revenue potential is great, and that CIO's really got to go all in, leaning in, pushing, developing, building centers of expertise, etc. But this is not a one-size-fits-all in my mind. You can't go all in on crypto unless there's a revenue opportunity for your organization.
I think that's fair. Shifting gears to our final topic. So everybody talks a lot about AI. I think everybody in the marketing field seems to bake AI into every product that they're trying to sell, whether it is or not, who knows. At the end of the day, it's obvious that there is certainly a good use case around automation within the enterprise to be able to drive efficiency. But at the same time, there is often a trade-off. Sometimes that comes as a function of customer support or of the human interaction. I would just kind of ask on your side, as technology leaders, obviously you see AI's potential. When you look at kind of all of the things that are emerging, chatbots instead of talking to a human, business processes that are just layers and layers of band-aids of automation using RPA but never fixing the process. Is AI and automation causing a bigger problem, or is it actually the next thing that really is going to solve the problems for the enterprise? Sigal, you want to kick us off?
I think you have to be cognizant of both, because there is a play for efficiency and effectiveness with RPA and AI. AI can play in many other areas, not just in the effectiveness space, because you can use AI to come up with new insight for your customers that people will bring to the customers, right? We're using AI a lot in our wealth management business at Morgan Stanley, where we can bring new investment ideas by the financial advisors to our wealth management customers. So you can use an AI in different areas, not just for efficiency and effectiveness. But I do think that it's very important to leverage it, because at the end of the day, technology does not have enough people. We all know we're short on talent to automate everything that can be automated. And in some places, in some instances, and again, going back to not one size fits all, in some places, you can't use RPA and you can use chatbots to automate things that technology doesn't have either the budget or the skill set or the people to put to make sure that they're more effective. So I think you need to be careful, you need to have the right controls, but there is place for both. And over time, you need to rethink some processes and maybe you'll need to redo them.
Larry, any counterpoints?
See, I describe the whole, crypto scene as an uneven wave. I think AI, RPA, etc., that bundle is an all-consuming tidal wave. If you're not in it, you're just going to get run over by it. I think it's so pervasive, we might not even be talking about it a few years from now. It's just understood.
Whatever happened to big data, right? Big data is not a thing anymore, right?
Every asset we have is going to have this stuff in it. Every business process is going to try and be more efficient. And Sigal alluded to this. Implementing AI isn't the same thing as implementing it well. Of course, we got to go implement it well. We have to think through all of the various elements of people, privacy, etc. But not implementing it, fatal.
Fair enough. Chad?
I wholeheartedly agree with Larry. I think, as he's mentioned in a couple of years, or maybe it was you, I don't think we'll be talking about it. The possibilities for AI, just from my perspective right now, are endless. It saves a lot of headache. It saves a lot of, frankly, human error. Can do 10 times as much, leveraging large data sets and AI than I ever could with warm bodies and seats. So I'm all in.
So, Krishna, the NBA is obviously a very human, sport and also a very human kind of experience. At some point, having robots on the court is probably not going to be that entertaining to watch, or maybe it will be. I don't know. But at some point, this goes too far. When do we hit that line? And what do you think about the whole kind of AI wave?
So I think there are three A's in AI, right? From my perspective, at least, I think the first one is assisted AI, which is what RPA is all about, which basically assisting humans to get the work done, and which is all about automation of the mundane, right? Invoice processing, onboarding procedures, and so on and so forth. The other end of the extreme is what I call autonomous AI, which is really the utopia, or maybe dystopia that people are looking for, right? When robots and AI takes over the entire world, and that's really what I think we are trying to build, right? Through autonomous AI. I think we're somewhere in between, though, which is really augmented AI, which is really helping humans make better decisions through data. And I think that fits into what the NBA is doing with sports as well, right? We have sensors and cameras mounted in the rafters in all of our arenas, and we are, HD cameras that are processing images at 50 images per 50 frames a second, and analyzing the game of basketball to figure out what calls. What the referees should have made but missed, or the trajectory of the ball and the possibility that it can actually go into the basket, and the potential of using that data for betting. As sports betting gets legalized across the country, right? So those are the kind of things that we have been looking at. It's a journey. I agree with what Larry said. You're either in it or you're not going to be in it. And I think we are part of the journey. And we believe that it can help our fans, it can help our players, it can help our coaches.
It's interesting. I think I'll also kind of second or third, I guess, on Larry's comment. This is coming, whether you like it or not. I think what we're not always factoring in is the fact that, and even in the kind of context that you've mentioned, Krishna, when you think about sports betting and you think about just the opportunities for exploiting some of this stuff, you're going to find that AI is on the other side of it too, right? And I think all these strategies, the attackers, from a security perspective, are leveraging AI, so we have to leverage AI in products. And so there is this giant race. I don't know at what point it's going to get real bad, but at some point I'm sure the robots will take over the world, and at that point, then I, for one, welcome our robot overlords. Well, thank you all very much for taking time today. This has been a delightful conversation. Really appreciate you all sharing your wisdom. And I look forward to hopefully doing this in person at some point, but glad that we could get together virtually, at least for the day.